You're watching Next Pitch, the student athlete playbook for parents raising tomorrow's athletes.
Hi, Anthony Leverett's here, host of the Next Pitch podcast. And on behalf of my producer and partner, Emmy Award-winning producer, Jason Cardona, we are thrilled to bring you an interview today with Meyers Drysdale. What an amazing human being, true pioneer, national champion, world champion. And as I talked to her, she seemed to be a history of sport professor as well. One of the greatest athletes in the history of our country, and had a great conversation with her. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Without further ado, here's Ann Meyers Drysdale. Welcome to the show. I will have properly introduced you beforehand, but just first and foremost, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule. I know you just got back from a road trip late last night, so thank you for coming on the show with us.
Thank you, Anthony. You've been looking forward to it.
Well, let's dive right in. You have such a story. As I was doing, I obviously I knew of you, and being in athletics and especially in basketball, everybody knows who you are. But once I dove into researching you, it's even more remarkable than I thought. And I can't wait to have this conversation. So let's just start. You grew up in a super athletic family. There was 11 of you, right? Weren't you number 6 out of 11?
Right.
And what was that like for you in a time where there weren't as many opportunities yet pre-Title IX for a young woman who had all these aspirations in athletics, but didn't have the same opportunities that men had at that time?
Well, I never looked at it that way. My dad played basketball at Marquette. Both my mom and dad are from Milwaukee. And they moved out to San Diego for their honeymoon. And first 6 of us were born in San Diego. And then he worked for Sears. So we moved back to Chicago, and we were there for about 8-9 years, 3 more born there, and then moved to Southern California, and the last 2 born in Southern California. But my sister Patty was the oldest of 11. I have 5 brothers and 5 sisters. And honestly, I mean, I saw women playing sports. I mean, Patty was at the forefront of what I saw. She was 8 years older than I was. And so I saw women playing softball and basketball and volleyball. And my dad would go and support her when she was playing AAU and all these different sports and so forth, while my mom was home with the other kids. But yeah, sports was a great outlet for a big family, whether it was outside or competition on game boards and playing cards or kick the can or hide and seek. I mean, there was always some kind of competition going on. And certainly sports was great for all of us. And the fact that our parents supported their daughters as much as their sons was a big plus.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. How important was that family support for you as a young student, young athlete, young woman growing up, and having that family support of chasing your dreams?
Well, it still is important to have family support. There's no question whether, my brothers and sisters, I mean, you come home from a competition, whether, one brother was playing football, another baseball, and Patty'd come home, or somebody had a swimming event. And, so somebody came home with a victory, and it's like, there were 4 other people in the house that did well. So what you did was nice. And maybe we did it for the attention of our parents. I don't know. But sports was just always something that I did. And growing up born in 1955 and growing up in the 50s and 60s and 70s and seeing that, they had the presidential competition in schools back in the 60s. But there were not a lot of sports offered to girls as far as organized sports, swimming and track and field. And so I'd seen Wilma Rudolph run in the Olympics. So I was like going, oh my gosh. And in 4th grade, I read a book on Babe Didrikson Zaharias. I didn't know anything about the Olympics. What dreams did you have? We were raised in the parochial school, so we were exposed to nuns. And so, what did you want to be when you grew up? Well, how many opportunities were really afforded to women at that time. And so in reading this book on Babe Didrikson Zaharias gave me the dream to be an Olympian. And because track and field was the sport that I got into, I was a high jumper and did the pentathlon. They didn't have the heptathlon yet. And I loved it. I loved competing, and I was competing against other girls and other women. And, but I was always playing basketball. I was always playing over the line with my brothers. We were playing football out in the street. So we ride our bikes to the schoolyard and run around the field or whatever we were doing. But we did not have a basket at our driveway. Would hit tennis balls against the garage. And, so we're always active. We're always doing something.
Driving your parents crazy with the bouncing of the balls.
And my dad was on the road a lot, but my mom got used to it. She knew.
So you get to high school, and I think I got this right. You won 7 varsity letters in 7 different sports. Is that correct?
13.
13 letters in 7 sports. Holy cow. So what was in this world right now, young people are told that, sometimes 7, 8, 9 years old that they got to specialize in one thing. And it's so, I believe it's so dangerous to the development of the overall young person, not just as an athlete, but as a human. What was the importance for you of being like the biggest multi-sport athlete maybe on the planet of what you did in kind of your development?
Well, I didn't think about that. I loved doing what I was doing, and I had the opportunity to do it and compete. In elementary school, there was one day I was at recess and playing football with the boys, and I had a teacher come up and say, well, we really don't want you playing football because it's not ladylike. And for me, I didn't understand that because, again, I was doing that with my brothers and so forth, and saw my sister competing. And, and that was true throughout growing up. Even in junior high, at lunchtime, I'd go play basketball with the guys on the outside courts. And again, another teacher would come up and say, we don't want you playing basketball with the boys, not ladylike. Certainly when I was growing up too, you had to wear a dress or a skirt, and I always wore shorts underneath my dresses. And so I could go out and play sports. Getting to high school was hard. David was 2 years ahead of me. My brother Jeff is 2 years younger. David's 2 years ahead. And I saw my brother Mark and Tom play football at high school. And my brother Mark went on to Cal on a football scholarship. He also played basketball in high school. I mean, everybody played different sports. I mean, it's just what you did. And to say that, specializing, unfortunately, we did it because we loved it and we had fun. Isn't that the sole purpose of doing something, is having fun?
Yeah.
And but I think today it's very difficult because parents see their child and what sports has done and social media and being on YouTube and so forth and getting hits and getting paid. It's all about the money. Yeah. And unfortunately, when you're out of it, majority of people at 18 that don't go on to get a scholarship, or they do get to college and they wane out of whatever sport they're playing. I mean, what do you do? What do you do? And you've been patted on your back since the time you were 5 years old, playing soccer or running track or swimming or whatever your sport is. And I think that that's the hardest adjustment. And even when you're a professional, no matter what the sport is, and you're out of it by the time you're 25 or 30 years old, you've got another 40, 50 years to live. Yeah. So what's going to inspire you to get up every morning if your sports has been taken away? And it's not just the competition, the competitive greatness, but it's the camaraderie. Yeah. It's the socialization of the athletes that you're competing with and against, and learning how to play and how to interact with people, and also to be coached, to understand that you all make mistakes. And that's what's so great about sports. We all fail. We fail all the time. And we make mistakes all the time. And hopefully you have educators that are not, browbeating children. Just like, you got to do it this way. And, you know what you did wrong. And they're like going, no, I don't. Help me. What did I do wrong?
Teach me, please. Teach me.
Teach me. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a tough time for parents because they see the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow because of their child. And I know I've seen some things on TV where they show parents and they have their young child playing the sport. And it's very difficult to see one parent with his daughter, a 7-year-old girl, playing golf. And he says, well, she's got to want to play that because I want her to play. Mm. And but that's a lot of what they see. And it's unfortunate. But I think playing multiple sports is a big plus.
What, as you look back on it, and obviously you an incredible athlete and decorated basketball career and all the things that we'll dive into, but playing all those other sports, how did they help you as a basketball player? What were the translatable skills that you learned being such a multi-dimensional athlete?
Well, again, my dad played not just basketball, but he played other sports, and my brothers played other sports. And seeing Patty play, 3 different sports, and she graduated from Cal State Fullerton, won a national championship under Billy Moore, and but she went on to play pro softball. But when she came back, she was playing volleyball still, in her 20s and 30s and 40s, and also playing basketball and so forth. And she was a coach at Pepperdine. So, being able to play so many different sports. And then Billie Jean King in 1974 beats Bobby Riggs. And, I'd always played tennis, and I had a junior high teacher who wanted to convince me to play tennis. 1972 Title IX was passed, and I did play tennis in high school, and I loved it. But I was drawn to so many different things. I ran track, I played softball, I played badminton, played tennis, played basketball and volleyball, field hockey. So, it was just a matter of competing and not just playing the one sport, because once that season was over, what were you going to do? Well, I was fortunate enough that I had teachers and educators that allowed me to play 2 sports at one time. And so I was still, if you want to call it cross training, which that terminology did not exist. And, but it was a matter of my dream was still to go to the Olympics. And I thought it was going to be in track and field, but, it ended up being in basketball. But the fact that my dream did come true to represent our country.
Yeah, so that's my next question. So as a high schooler, you secured a spot on the national team for basketball. What did that feel like at such a young age to represent your country at that time, be a part of something like that? And obviously, you said you didn't know much about the Olympics when you were younger. You know plenty about them now. But what was that feeling like for you at 16 years old, 17 years old as a high schooler being with the Olympic national team?
Well, you have to go back to elementary school, and that's why your family is so important in the support and communication. So when I was in 5th and 6th grade, they had started a boys after-school sports program, and it was basketball, and they would not let me play. The school would not allow me to play because I was a girl. And unbeknownst to me, my parents went to the superintendent, went to the school district, the PTA, the parents, the teachers, and they got it okay that I could play with the boys after-school sports program. And so I was playing with the boys, even though I was playing with the boys outside of school. This was now an organized situation within the school that I was on the team playing with the boys. I told you about junior high, and then I get to a high school. And so I know all these kids because, again, during the summer with my brother David, we're playing pickup games all the time at our high school gym and so forth. And so between my junior and senior year of high school, I wanted to play on the boys varsity team during my school year. And so even though I was playing summer league, when the school year came around, when you're in high school, your emotions are changing, physically you're changing, what people say about you. So I had a lot of people say a lot of negative things, and it affected me. And so I didn't play on the boys high school team, but it allowed me to play on all these other different sports for the girls teams. But I always say one door closes, another one opens. And so because I didn't play on the boys team, it gave me the opportunity to play and be a part of USA basketball and try out with the team. So I was the youngest player on that team. And unbeknownst to me, I had no idea that 1976 would be the very first year they had in the Olympics. I was a sophomore at UCLA. So, but in high school, I'm playing on this USA Olympic team, and the women are just 2-3 years older than I was. But they're all in college. They're all, seem much older than I am. And so we are playing in the United States against the Soviet Union. And we're all a bunch of young college kids, basically, and me, a high school kid. But and we're only together for a couple weeks, where the Soviet Union and Eastern Bloc countries at that time, they were professionals. They were together 8-10 years. They had women that were in their 20s and 30s and had children and family and so forth. And so we went around playing the Soviet Union. We go back to New York, which is the first time I'm traveling, cross country doing something like this. We lose by 3. We lose in a close game at Madison Square Garden at the Felt Forum. And we're all excited. It's on TV, and Brent Musburger is interviewing us and so forth. And we're so excited. But then we go to the next city, and we get smeared. The Soviet Union just kind of put everything together and said, we're not going to let the Americans do this. And their average front line was 6'6", because their starting center was Uliana Semenova at 7'2".
Wow.
So she was built like Shaq, if you want to have a comparison. And
wow.
So they were very different. And they had veteran guards that were, again, they were in their late 20s and so forth, and had been playing for a long time within their country. And so it was a eye-opening situation for me. And then I would be able to make other USA teams, whether the Pan Am Games or the World Championships or the Jones Cup, and just all these different competitions that the United States were having because in 1976, again, unbeknownst to me, that they were going to have an Olympic team. So track kind of went by the wayside for me, and I started focusing on the basketball. Even at UCLA, though, I ran track on the freshman team, and we won the national title. I had nothing to do with it. I know that. And,
but you still have that national championship.
That's right. And I played 2 years of volleyball and wanted to play a third, but my knees were kind of shot, and I wanted to save them for the 1980 Olympics. And I tried out for the tennis team and badminton team. So, you know, I enjoyed representing my school, representing my family. And David, by the way, I'm a freshman at my high school when he's a senior, and they win CIF. They win the California Federation of Division II. And that was such an exciting time. It was so much fun to watch Dave play. And, but I was kind of like not very secure because I'm the middle of 11 children and nobody loves me, you know, right? So I always felt that I was in Dave's shadow. And so after my freshman year, I ended up going to an all-girls Catholic school where my sister Patty was teaching. And so I played volleyball for her and played basketball for Darlene May, who was the very first woman who played all those sports with my sister Patty. But she was the first woman athlete in international play to referee a men's game in the Olympics. And so I knew Darlene, you know, growing up and so forth. But so I went the 1 year to Conley and then transferred back to my public high school and had wonderful teachers there and so forth. But, you know, by the time I get to my senior year in high school, I'm on the USA team. I'm not playing on the boys team. I'm playing all these other sports. And Dave is going to be a senior at UCLA. He had been recruited by Coach John Wooden. He'd won a national title his sophomore year, and Bill Walton was going to be a senior. And they lost that year with Keith Wilkes and so forth. And so he was going to be a senior in 1975, and I was going to be a freshman. Had no idea where I was going to go to school, whether I didn't play sports. And even though in 72, you know, Title IX had passed, Title IX was not about women's sports. It was about education. It was about equal pay in education, which we know that still doesn't exist today, as it doesn't exist equality-wise, Title IX, in women's sports, in not only college, but high schools. But needless to say, Dave came home one weekend with Kenny Washington, who was going to be the women's coach. And Kenny had played for Coach Wooden, Papa I call him, for 2 years on their national titles. And he was going to be the women's coach. And they basically said, how would you like to go to UCLA on a basketball scholarship? I said, okay. I mean,
Did you know you were the first woman to receive a full scholarship in the United States?
None of that really sunk in. Not, you know, the fact that, you know, our parents couldn't afford any of us to go to a lot of the colleges, and the fact that they were going to give me a scholarship to go play basketball and go to a school like UCLA. I mean, and we followed David. I mean, it was such a wonderful year. We didn't make it to the final 16 for the women, but watching David his senior year, again, that was one of the best times for me at UCLA, just watching my brother win a national title and be an All-American and be the #2 pick with the LA Lakers. So, you know, UCLA really has shaped who I am because of the coaches and the people that I played for, and certainly my teammates and my opponents and so forth. But, you know, I love UCLA. I love what UCLA gave me as far as my education and the opportunity to go represent them in the United, and as a U.S. citizen and for this country in the Olympics. And so in 1975, when I'm a freshman, we're going to the World Championships. We're going to the Pan Am Games. We win gold in Mexico City. And we go to the World Championships, and we don't qualify. We don't qualify for the Olympics. And they only take 6 teams at this time. This is going to be the first time women's basketball is in the Olympics in 1976 in Montreal. And so it's the Soviet Union, Czechoslovakia, and Japan. And the host country automatically gets a qualification, which is Canada. So there's 2 spots open. So we have to go to a pre-Olympics in Hamilton, Ontario, and we end up winning that against Bulgaria. And so we two countries go to Montreal to compete as the 16. So now they've got 16 countries that compete, both on the men and the women's side, and it's completely different. They're professionals. Again, we were all amateurs. We were all college kids, and not a lot of time spent together. Billy Moore, who coached my sister Patty, was going to be our Olympic coach, and we ended up winning silver behind the Soviet Union. And so, what a thrill to represent your country and stand that podium, and even all the competitions that we won, and would hear our national anthem and have a gold medal around us. But at the Olympics, we won silver, and it's still, as Billy Moore said, we were the first. We will always be the first. And I'm so proud of all these other women's teams that have come along, and the opportunity as professional athletes that they can compete and represent their country.
Yeah, it's super cool. So during your time at UCLA, you have all kinds of accomplishments. The one that you're one of 5 people still to this day that ever had a quadruple-double in a game. Do you know that stat, that there's only 4 more people since you did it? You were the first. You're the only 1 male and 3 females have ever done that before. It's pretty crazy. Do you remember that game? I'm sure you do, like it was yesterday.
No, I don't.
You don't remember that game?
You can't accomplish any of that stuff without your teammates, honestly.
Yeah. Well, I know that, but it's a pretty cool stat. So during your time there, obviously you developed a relationship with Coach Wooden. What sort of impact and sort of impact did he have on your life as you got to know him, both first as a student athlete there, and then obviously your relationship carried on with him after your time being a player there? What was that relationship like?
Well, UCLA was different, and I came in as Dave Meyers' little sister, and I was very proud of it. And so the women's department hadn't really kind of developed yet. Dr. Judy Holland had not gotten there. Kenny Washington was probably very influential in the fundamentals of the game for me, and helping me mature and understand myself a little bit more, which was not easy as a freshman. But again, watching David that year, and because we didn't have really the women's department so set up, Gary Cunningham, who was the assistant coach, really kind of took me under his wing, and I'd be in his office all the time. He'd help me with my classes and so forth, that I could go to practice, and everything worked out. And Coach Wood and Papa's office was right across the way, and I'd go in there and just hang out, because it's not like it was the first time that we had met him, because all through David's freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, we were at the UCLA games all the time and would see Coach afterwards, and his wife Nellie, and my mom became very close with Nellie in the stands, and my sister Kathy was best friends with Coach Wooden's first granddaughter. So all these tie-ins with our family, with the Wooden family, was pretty amazing. But just to sit and talk. He always had an open door, and even after my husband passed away, Don Drysdale, that I would take the kids up to his apartment in Encino, and we'd just sit and talk. I mean, he would tell stories, the same stories. If they weren't. He just had such a great sense of humor. But he took me under his wing. He kind of called me one of his other grandchildren, which was certainly an honor. But I just think that going into the men's athletic department, they all kind of they were, Dick Vermeil was there, Terry Donahue, Jim Bush. I mean, because I was running track my freshman year, Jim Bush was, another coach that I was close to. And so they all kind of embraced me because I was Dave's sister. And, and that was a positive influence for me.
So you just brought up your late husband, Don Drysdale. What was that like? 2 superstars, competitive human beings. How did that relationship come together? And did you guys compete at everything you did inside your house, or were you able to take that competitive edge off in your relationship?
Well, growing up in Southern California, we were always, Drysdale and Koufax for the Dodgers, but I was not a big baseball fan. David, his favorite player was Willie Mays from the Giants. But so we kind of followed, and we had the baseball cards. Of course, a lot of times we used them on our bikes for the sound with our spokes and everything. Yeah. And but we didn't really follow baseball because we were always out playing ball ourselves. And even really, my parents being from Milwaukee, I mean, the one thing that we watched on TV every Sunday were the Green Bay Packers. And to this day, I'm a diehard Green Bay Packer fan. But and then every now and then you would get an NBA game on TV. You would be fortunate enough to see the Lakers or the Sixers or the Celtics or the Knicks. Those were probably the top 4 teams that you got to see. And then you go out on the playground and try and be John Havlicek or Jerry West or Bill Russell or Wilt Chamberlain or, all those players. So that's how we kind of grew up. We didn't grow up like in 1979, when I tried out with the Pacers, and because we'd won a national title at UCLA, I was hoping to go to the 1980 Olympics. I was the #1 pick of the new WBL, the new Women's Professional Basketball League, but I wanted to stay amateur to go to the 1980 Olympics. We'd gone to Puerto Rico, and I carried the flag in opening ceremonies in Puerto Rico for the Pan Am Games. We went to the World Championships. We won gold there. And we went to the Spartacade Games and in Russia, and we were coming back and getting ready to go to the World University Games back in Moscow, training in Squaw Valley. And I got a call from the new owner of the Indiana Pacers. And David was already playing in the NBA. He had been drafted by the Lakers, but was in the trade with Junior Bridgman, Elmore Smith, and Brian Winters to Milwaukee to get Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And so Dave was in the NBA, and I knew a lot of players in the NBA, coaches and NBA guys playing at Pauley Pavilion and pickup games and just different other events that I was involved. And so when I got this call, I was like, who is this guy? But I looked back when I was in high school, when 5 years before I had a lot of people talk me out of playing with the boys. And I thought, what an opportunity of a lifetime. Most men don't get. Yeah. And maybe God was preparing me for this my whole life, because my whole life I've been playing the game of basketball and sports. So what I was doing was nothing different. I think it was harder on the guys than it was on me because they were not used to having a woman out there playing. So I decided to bypass the Olympics, which was a very difficult decision because Jimmy Carter had not boycotted yet. And when it did, I felt so bad for everybody, all those athletes that had trained, because they're only going to get one chance as an amateur to compete and represent your country. So, but I moved forward and I went through the 3-day tryout. Slick Leonard, Bob Leonard was the coach, came out to California several times to talk me out of it. This was a very uncomfortable situation for him, for the organization. What are they doing? He's going, they're going to embarrass the organization. She's not good enough. She's going to get hurt. She's too slow. She's too small. She's too this, too that. And as I said, I looked back and I had the support of my family, the belief of what I was capable of doing. And I went in, my brother Mark, who was an attorney at that time, represented me and signed a $50,000 contract for 1 year. And it was a personal service contract. So I would be with the organization whether I made it or not. In my mind, I was going to make it. But when we went through the 3-day tryout, 2 practices a day, and Slick Leonard called me in and said, well, you did great. We're really proud of you, but, we're going to move on. And Jack McCloskey was an assistant coach at the time. And he said, fundamentally, I was better than half the guys out there. So winning a championship at UCLA under Billy Moore, who would come over to UCLA and be our coach my senior year, being the #1 draft pick in the WBL, having an opportunity to try out in the NBA. And, as much as I still wanted to play, I'm broadcasting. I'm broadcasting for the Indiana Pacers. And also doing appearances, correct? And so forth. I took some broadcasting classes at UCLA. And as a matter of fact, in 1979, before Prime Ticket happened, I was broadcasting some of the men's UCLA games. And
you were one of the first female broadcasters in a time where there weren't a lot of them, correct? How many were there before you? Do you know? Well,
I think the two that really come to mind are Jane Kennedy and Phyllis George. I think it was CBS that they did the studio with NFL games, and believe me, there was a lot of uproar, and that's in the early 70s. And so now ESPN didn't exist. Yeah. After David's games at UCLA, we would go back to his apartment. My sister Kathy and Dave lived together, and we'd go back to their apartment and go watch the game because it was on after the 10 o'clock news, Channel 5. And so we would watch the game, and that's how really you got to see the games on TV. And so when I tried out for the Pacers, it was also the very first year of ESPN.
Mm.
And so I'm broadcasting now, and but I still want to play. I'm bummed that I'm not on the team. I think a lot of people say, well, you couldn't have been on the team. You wouldn't have started. Yeah, I would not have started. The name of my book is You Let Some Girl Beat You, because you're out on the court and the guys are saying, oh, no big deal. You blocked your shot. It's only a girl. And then if I made a shot, it's like, oh, you let some girl beat you. And so I think it's not so much whether I would have played Anthony, it's so much as just being on the team and the variable of trying to exist in that world. And like even today in the NBA, I mean, at that time, you only 11 roster spots. And the minimum salary in the NBA at that time was $145,000. And I was offered a $50,000 contract. So I would say I was a little underpaid. But even in saying that, though, today you have 15 roster spots in the NBA. It's completely different. I was a free agent in rookie camp. I was not drafted. So, going through that process, it was more difficult for the guys. But if I had made the team, what is the media going to insinuate? Yeah. What are the wives and girlfriends are going to insinuate? What are guys from other teams going to insinuate? I think that would be the most difficult thing. Somebody called me from the NBA the other day and said, do you think Caitlin Clark could play in the NBA? I said, yeah, but if you look at the roster spots, they go 8 deep, 9 deep, right? But even those last spots, 10, 12, 13, 14, 48-minute game, 82 games, maybe more if you go in the playoffs. And how many minutes do you get to play that whole season? Yeah. A lot of guys don't even get off the bench. Yeah. And that's probably what would have happened to me. But people said, well, you're taking a spot from a guy. They've got to support their family. I thought, well, I got to support my family too.
That's right. Yeah.
So
well, I'm so glad
the thinking was,
changed.
and I think when the first time that happened. So in the meantime, during that though, I still want to play. And so I'm 24 years old. Indiana releases me from my contract. I go into the WBL. The Houston Angels had drafted me number 1. They traded my rights to the New Jersey Gems. And so I'm in New Jersey playing, but I had signed a contract kind of with TWI, which you were going to compete in something called the Women's Superstars, which was a made-for-TV that they had for the men, but they were doing it for the women. So I was going to go to the Bahamas, and I had some time off in between games in the WBL, and I went down to the Bahamas, and my mom met me down there. And guess who the announcers were?
No idea.
A guy named Bob Euchre from Milwaukee.
Just a bit outside.
Yeah, and so, obviously the beer commercials. And a guy named Don Drysdale. So they're the announcers for ABC and the Women's Superstars. And I really didn't know who Don was. The only Don I knew on TV was Don Meredith from Monday Night Football. Yeah. And it's like I said, I really didn't follow baseball. So that's where we met. We met in the Bahamas, and he was very supportive. I think he knew who I had no idea who he was. So I'm sure that was appealing, because throughout his career, I'm sure he was bombarded by, oh, you're Don Drysdale. Yeah. And but it just grew to respect him and his kindness and just thoughtfulness, because as a woman athlete, I think a lot of times men are intimidated, but he was not. And I think he was very secure in who he was. And, I'm very grateful and blessed that he came into my life.
So you mentioned the superstars. You've succeeded in everything you've done. I think this is maybe not funny, but you finished 4th the first year. That had to drive you nuts.
Well, I was indoors playing pro basketball, so I was only going 90 feet up and down, and I was probably as white as a ghost. And it was. And so you go down to the Bahamas, you're in the sun and everything. And even though I had done a lot of those competitions, you have to compete in a 2-day event with 7 sports. So you're in the sun and so forth. Yeah, coming in 4th, I was not a happy camper, put it that way.
But then you came back and won it 3 years in a row afterwards. So that's
got invited to the men's superstars.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect example of being a competitor, right? Like I finished 4th. To hell with you guys. I'm going to go win this thing the next 3 years.
Well, you had asked about Don and I competing, and when we were married, he got me into playing golf. I played
Okay.
a little bit with my sister Patty, and I had no idea about how to play golf, but he got me to get lessons and so forth. But yes, we would compete like chipping or whatever, and he was a good golfer. Of course, he could fly it all over the place too. But when he needed to get a putt or whatever, he was very good at focusing.
That's great. So let's shift into the game today. So you are obviously deeply involved in both, have been involved in both men's and women's basketball, but how cool has it been to see sort of the growth of the game, the way the opportunities have gotten to where it's still not equal, but it is, and hopefully someday we don't have to have an even conversation about equality. It just is what it should be. But what how proud are you to have been a part of that, and what do you see the differences between the game before and what it is today?
Well, certainly when I played, you had a handful of athletes that were really good. Today, you can go to all 12 spots on the women's team in the WNBA, and they're all good. Like, so many people are stunned that Golden State, the Valkyries, the first expansion team since 2008, since Atlanta, how well they're doing. Well, they're picking players from other teams, and Natalie Nakase, who UCLA Bruin, has done a great job, and was with Vegas and when they won their 2 WNBA titles. But these women were all stars in high school. They were all stars in college. And so they got to the pros and they're playing, you got a 23-year-old graduating as good as they are, the majority of them coming out of college, that they've got to sit the bench behind somebody else. Like in Phoenix, we had Diana Taurasi for 20 years. Seattle has Sue Bird for 21 years. Now you've got, who's going to play behind Neko Gumike?
Yeah.
Candace Parker when she was playing, or Maya Moore. And so you're coming along and you're trying to break in just to make the team. And so every spot is a very talented player.
Yeah.
And certainly the Valkyries have shown that this year. But it's tough. And I love that the exposure, because USA Basketball has been a big plus, because back in '76, when it was the very first year, it was called ABA USA, and there still was not a lot of organization yet for the women. If you go back, again, a history lesson. So 1972, Hank Iba had been the Olympic coach, and he'd been the Olympic coach the 2 Olympics before. 72, really, the Soviet Union is handed the gold medal after 3 tries, right? Doug Collins hits a couple free throws, they win it, the buzzer goes. No, we're going to give the Soviets several more times a chance to win. And they do. They end up winning, and they get the gold. And those guys will not accept the silver, even to this day. And they're all in their 70s and so forth. So what do? In 1976, they make a change. Dean Smith is the coach. They put on 4 guys from one college, North Carolina. Phil Ford, Walter Davis, Mitch Kupchak, and Tom LeGrand. They're all, usually you just have one guy from one college throughout those years. They're all amateurs still. And so the focus is really on that '76 Olympic team for the men. And so we're the first year for the women. There's been no really training ground or whatever, not like there is today. USA Basketball has, 16 and under teams. And you have AAU teams, club teams that are playing throughout the country by the time kids are 10 years old.
Yeah.
And the McDonald's All-Americans and so forth. None of that stuff existed. In fact, Kodak was the very first national sponsor for women's basketball in college, and that's where the All-Americans came from. Now you've got so many All-Americans. I've got 2 awards named for me for College Player of the Year, and then also with the Naismith. And none of that stuff ever existed. And so now, the men are making changes. And so in 1992, what is that? The Dream Team. Yeah. You have professional players. And so the women's team is probably the best in the country with Teresa Edwards and Katrina McLean, but we lose to the unified team. They were not the Soviets anymore, the unified team, but basically the same players. And so one game they had a bad game, they win bronze. So what did they do in '96? In '95, they put a team together with Cheryl Swoops, Lisa Leslie, McLean and Edwards are still on the team. Tara Vanderveer, the coach from Stanford, takes a year off. She's going to be, so they go around, play 60 games throughout the world with this team, and they're paying them. So in '96, the Olympics comes along, and David Stern from the NBA says, we're going to start a women's professional league. even though the WBL that I had played for had started things. Yes, it folded, but then there were a few other leagues that started and folded. Now you had the ABL was going on before the WNBA was going on. But the power of and support of the NBA was huge. And so now you've got the Olympics in '96 where the women win gold. And they've won gold ever since. And you've got professional athletes that are playing. And but that beginning of the WBL really opened up the doors.
Yeah, it's super cool. My daughter just graduated from high school, and her dream as a young person was to be a Division I basketball player. And she didn't achieve that dream, but she played all the way through high school. And instead of having male role models to follow in professional athletics, having people like Caitlin Clark and Diana Taurasi and Sue Bird and Kelsey Plum, for her to be able to watch as a young person and not have to identify with a male as the role model for her was so cool for us. My wife played in the Pac-10 at Washington State, and it just the change and the growth and the opportunities that are now available for young women because of pioneers and people like you that have drugged the sport along. It is fantastic for the growth of the
Anthony,
game.
it's like you as a father and a husband. We're seeing the support that men are giving women, not just in basketball, but in ice hockey, in soccer, all these other leagues that are starting up. And it's so important. And yet it's been going on for a long time. Certainly Caitlin Clark effect has really brought eyes to the game.
Yeah.
But we've had so many women in this league that are just, how do you not know these names?
Yeah.
And so even before Caitlin got to the league, Sabrina Ionescu.
Yes, what a player.
Shooter. Diana Taurasi was a shooter. And but there's something special about Caitlin, there's no question, but there's also, Angel Reese, and whether they like it or not, I think the media has made more out of it than it really is.
Yeah.
You got to love Angel Reese and what she does on the floor. And so Cheryl Miller and I coached the All-Star team last year, and we had them in the locker room. And it was a game that they ended up beating the Olympic team, which I think really helped Cheryl Reeve get her team prepared to win gold, because against France, that was a very difficult game to win.
Yeah.
But in saying that, as good as Caitlin is, and I love what she's doing for the game, there are 10 other players, or honestly 50 other players that are pretty talented in this league. And just as we said, Diana's retired, Sue Bird's retired, Lisa Leslie's retired, Lauren Jackson's retired, Maya Moore's retired, Candace Parker's retired. And you go down the line, and the great women athletes, and there will be a time Caitlin Clark retires and there'll be a name. As much as we talk about Michael Jordan, there was somebody before Michael Jordan, whether it was Connie Hawkins or Julia Serving. Yeah. Then it was Kobe. Then it's LeBron. And there will be somebody after LeBron. It's just the nature of sports.
I agree with you. And I just think it's fantastic that there's so many young women out there that are little kids right now that are getting to go to WNBA games and college women's basketball games and identify them as heroes instead of having to attach that always to the male player. Let's talk about college athletics. You were the first Division I full scholarship student athlete female in the country. Now, the state of college athletics is these kids are on the move. There's transfer portal, there's NIL, and I think there's a lot of good that's come from some of this, but also, it's just it's complete disruption of what the system was before. It's trickled down into high school sports and youth athletics. What is your take on kind of the state of college athletics? Obviously, your university moving to the big, whatever the big's called now, Big Ten. What is your take on this state of college athletics? And do you think it's been healthy, or do you think it needs more guardrails?
Well, it certainly is a challenge. It's a balancing act for a lot of the coaches in all the sports. And I know for years, coaches have coached at a college, and we've seen a lot of football coaches and men's basketball coaches leave their universities to go somewhere else for more money. And a kid will say, well, I came to this school to play for you. How come you just get to leave and I can't? And now that opportunity is available to players. And I think what's a challenge is that an athlete, even in the high school level, could go to 5 different high schools, can go to 5 different colleges. You can transfer. There's no penalty for it and so forth. So when things get tough or you don't like the way things are, how do you get through that adversity? How do you stay strong and positive and learn to become a part of that team, or to, and there are times where you go somewhere and it's not what you thought, and the coach and so forth, or maybe the school is too difficult, or you are homesick and so forth. And but the challenge is, how do you stick it out?
Yeah.
I mean, that's life.
Yeah.
We don't always get our way in life.
Yeah.
And so if you keep jumping around and you go to 5 different schools, you know, and that's kind of the negative part of it. But the positive part is that they do have the opportunity to go somewhere and be the player. But again, that's part of the process of growing up.
Yeah.
And we see that all the time, whether you're in elementary school, then you got to go to junior high, you got to start all over again. You start at the bottom. You go to high school, you start at the bottom. You're a great high school player, you go to college, you got to start at the bottom. And you know, it's a hard transition a lot of times. And the same thing as a good college player, you try and go to the pros. You know, am I going to play G League, or am I going to play in the minor leagues, or again, you know, in the NFL? I mean, just hanging on to try and make it a squad. And you got to constantly stay in shape and to be on the kicking team, just to be on the kicking team. And you might have been a great player at your university where you were doing so many different things. And
yeah.
So it's a mindset. And I think the average age limit for the NFL is about 3 years. And then I think basketball's next for about 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And then baseball is 6 years. So you're going to get a Clayton Kershaw. You're going to get, you know, players, LeBron and so forth. You're going to get players like that, and the kind of money that they're making and the years that they're playing. But the average, so you go in from a high school or from college and you're playing in the pros or trying to make a pro team, you're 21, 23 years old, and you're out of the game before you're 30.
Yeah.
What do you do? Just like I opened up with, you know, the beginning of this interview. What do you do? And have you been trained? And so, you know, relationships are so important. And by the time you're, you know, junior high, high school, you know, interaction and meeting people and having them understand what you want to do, whether it's in technology, whether it's, you know, and it's always changing with AI now and so forth. But their social media has changed with kids. 18 to 30-year-olds, what do you want to be? I want to be an influencer.
Yeah.
So that's how I'm going to make money, is being an influencer. Well, what happens when you're not an influencer anymore?
Yeah.
What happens when the advertising dries up or people are not watching you and so forth? Then what? How do you sit in front of a computer or your phone all day? And that's the hard part. As much as the phone and technology has given us such positive things, it has taken away the ability to communicate.
Yeah.
Schools have taken away handwriting, cursive handwriting, printing. It's all on the computer and typing. So you go to a basketball camp and kids say, "Can I have your autograph?" They can't read it, right? They don't know how to read cursive, let alone print. And they say, well, books are going to be obsolete. Well, why should books be obsolete? I mean, that's how you learn to read. You read to your children when they're little, you know, all the children's books and so forth. So, you know, so as much as it's a positive, and coaches and parents talk about this all the time, and parents are just as bad, is they go to a restaurant, or even if, you know, you got a team meeting and you go to a team meal, everybody's got their phones out. They're scrolling through Instagram and TikTok and whatever else there's out there, instead of putting the phones away, having to be able to have a conversation with somebody and listen to somebody that is being interviewed, an athlete or even a young person. Certainly, especially some of these interviews, even actors, that they use the word "like."
Yes.
Within their conversation.
Yes.
Because in speaking, and believe me, I've learned a lot. I was not a good broadcaster when I started out, and I had to learn a lot. When I was at UCLA and broadcasting on radio, and I would say, "Oh, you know, did you see that?" And I would say, you know, and I was, "No, we don't know. Explain it to us."
Yeah.
So broadcasting, and we didn't have the kind of classes and that they have today, all these media and sports broadcasting and sports this and communications. And a lot of those did not exist back in the 70s and 80s. And again, not until ESPN and all these other sports outlets and so forth. You know, where is Sports Illustrated gone?
Yeah.
Where is Life magazine gone and so forth? But you see that there's so many young kids because they're exposed to the phone and being videotaped, and what they're videotaping or whatever, they're taking a picture of their meal. And
Yeah, what did I just
they're
eat?
used to being on camera. They're used to being speaking.
Yeah.
And so I'm so impressed with their presence on camera. But it's been a very competitive business, and I've been doing it 45 years now, and it's still very, very competitive.
Yeah. So you were named last year the Orange County Youth Sports Foundation's Sportsman of the Year. How involved are you in youth sports? Or are you around it? Do you see it? And as you watch kind of what's happening with parents and we talked about this early on, specialization and 8-year-olds, parents getting into fights in the stands and attacking referees and all of the terrible things that you hear in youth sports. What's your involvement, and what do you think that system and how we can change it if there is a way to change it?
Well, I'm on the Rose Bowl Institute impact with that also. And I was very involved with Special Olympics because of Rayford Johnson at UCLA, and just doing basketball camps throughout my life, and seeing the change. Sometimes I think camps should be for the parents more so than the children. And I think
let's start that business. Let's start a parent camp.
About the children. Well, the hard part too, again, I'm a UCLA disciple. I'm a John Wooden disciple. Don't whine, don't complain, don't make excuses. He had 3 rules. 1, don't be critical of your teammates. We all make mistakes. And it's like, don't be critical of others. Try and be positive. Second one, be on time. Everybody's time is important. And so if you don't think their time is important, they don't think your time is important. And the third was no cursing. And people laugh at that. And it was just a matter of like, you're losing control of your emotions. You're making poor decisions because of the way you're speaking. And unfortunately, in today's day and age, the F word is like nothing to a child because they hear it from their parents. They hear it in sports all the time. What allows the classroom? The classroom is the field, is the court. It's and what allows our educators, our teachers, our coaches to use that kind of language. Yeah. And I understand that there are different cultures in this country, and every child is raised differently. But if you have a culture like you did at UCLA, you understand that you respect yourself a little bit more, that you can have a conversation or express your unhappiness and not having to swear. But we hear it in high schools all the time. We hear it in junior highs and elementary kids. But we hear it from the parents. We hear it from the coaches. And so it's like, well, they do it all the time. Why should we correct it? Yeah. So for me, it starts within you, and how you respond to that. But I just think that, we all sworn or whatever, but at some point you are the teacher. There's a child following you, and how you not only speak, but your body language and what you do and how you react to things. It's all about your attitude, and you can be a positive role model, or you can be a negative role model, and everybody's role model, that's for sure. But I think that parents, because the money, Anthony, the money is so big, and gambling is good. I mean, if you look at most of the professional sports, majority of them have a sponsorship with DraftKings or FanDuel, or how many are there out there? But money's it right there. Yeah,
the youth sports has become a multi-billion-dollar industry, and people who are involved at the youngest levels make a lot of money off of these kids.
Just like you talked about with colleges and high schools, the nil.
Yeah.
The likeness and it's how much money are they getting for that?
That's right. It's a big deal. Well, I want to ask you a question that I hope no one's asked you before, because I know you do.
You got this from Val.
I did get this from Miss Val. I talked with her this morning, and we were talking just about camaraderie and making time and going on this journey. The coolest part of the journey sometimes is the people that you meet, right? And the camaraderie that you have with those people. And she told me a story this morning about you writing her a card every month from the time that she had been diagnosed with cancer, and how much that means to her. And what about that camaraderie? What about that group of people that you've been attached to through your journey makes you want to be able to do something like that for her? And I'm telling you, when she told me today, she was almost crying about how important that is. And I think the lesson is that you can make the time to make a positive impact on other people. Why is that so important to you?
Well, that comes from my foundation. My parents, both my parents wrote letters, not only to each other, but to different people. And I go back to another Coach Wooden story, that being from Martinsville, Indiana, and he and Nell were in the elevator with a couple of their friends that had come out from Indiana, and they're in the elevator, and Coach Wooden says, his friend Jim says, John, these people in California, they just aren't friendly. They don't say hello. They don't. And Coach Wooden looks at him and said, "Well, did you say hello to them?" Well, no. So and you hear people say, "Well, they don't call me. They don't." Well, why? You can pick up the phone. You can pick up the phone and call somebody. So, but the letter writing, the cards, believe me, I'm like a hallmark of myself. I've got so many cards here at the house. But there's certain people in my life that hopefully you can touch and make an impact. And certainly Miss Val has done that to a lot of people. And but just for friendship. And Sue Ann Quest, who was the softball coach after Sharon Backus. Sharon Backus played all those sports with my sister Patty, so I knew Sharon from when I was little. And Sue and I were at UCLA together. And Sue and I have remained friends, and I've remained friends with a lot of teammates from when I played at UCLA and from USA Basketball. And it's important to have those relationships. And so for me, writing a card, and hopefully this president doesn't touch the mail, which he already has affected it, because there's a lot of people that still use stamps.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a really valuable lesson for people out there to hear that it doesn't have to be something massive all the time. You can have an impact in a really small, continuous way on people if you just take the time and a little bit of effort and energy to make that a priority in your life. And that passing that on to the people that you're around is something that can be huge for them when you don't see them all the time, but you can have an impact on them. It's pretty cool.
Well, I enjoy it too.
Yeah.
Because all those people, they've impacted my life one way or the other.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show. It has been fantastic to hear your story. I've got two things that I do with every guest at the end of the show. So first and foremost, I'm going to ask you to go back to that 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old Ann Meyers. Well, it was Ann Meyers in those days, not Ann Meyers Drysdale. To Ann Meyers at 12, 13 years old, knowing everything that you know now, everything that you've been through, the journey that you've been on. What advice would you give yourself as a young person if you could go back and do it again?
Do it again. Do it all over again the same way. The Frank Sinatra song.
Yeah.
Had regrets, few regrets, not enough. It's not enough to change your life.
That's awesome.
It wouldn't be where I am today without all those things that have happened to me.
Yeah. Do it again. Show up and do it again. And that's such a cool thing, because that's what sports is supposed to teach young people, right? Like, is how to get up and do it again, how to get up and do it again, fail, get up and do it again. And to be able to think
Failing to prepare is preparing to fail.
Yeah. Yeah. You probably don't know this, but my mentor and boss, guy named, when I was a young coach on the men's side, guy named Gordy James, spent a bunch of time with Coach Wooden and as a graduate student. And I got immersed in all of the Coach Wooden sayings. And I actually got to meet him when I was a young coach. I was running camps up at the United States Basketball Academy, and he came up with a few other coaches and did a little, not a clinic, but just kind of a little small conference there's only about 30 of us there. It was unbelievable, and got to listen to his wisdom as a young guy. It had a huge impact on me.
Well, I would say live each day as your masterpiece.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, last thing here, is dad jokes. So do you have it? I'm a big dad joke guy. They crack me up. My kids tell them to me. My wife sends them to me all the time. Do you have a dad joke for me?
No, I don't. And now
Okay.
I'm going to have to, that's one thing I'm going to have to start working on.
Well, you're in luck because I have a book right here that I'm going to be able to pull out here. Okay, just the first one I got to. How does a penguin build a house?
I don't know.
Igloos it together.
Good one.
Well,
thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on today. It is an absolute pleasure to meet you. You are one of the true pioneers in this country, and the opportunity to talk to you face to face, though virtually, is a huge honor for me. And thank you for everything that you've done for the game, for the transformation of opportunity for women in this country. And my daughter gets to grow up in a much better world because of people like you. And I am deeply grateful for what you did.
Thank you, Anthony. I feel so blessed to be from the family that I am, and going to UCLA, and the people that have been in my life. And I've had so much help that, I'm grateful, and just having this interview, I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. We'll hopefully I'll get to meet you in person one of these days.
That'd be great.
Thanks again. Anthony Leverett's back here, host of the Next Pitch podcast, and just finished up my conversation with Ann Meyers Drysdale. And what an absolute gem she is. Just literally a history of sport professor, and could have listened to her talk about the history of sports forever, but really appreciate her taking the hour that she spent with us. And I think a couple things I want to touch on that we talked about. She is the epitome of a multi-sport athlete. I got it wrong when I was talking to her. She won 13 different varsity letters in high school, and played just every multitude of sports, which obviously helped her in her growth and her development. And she did all that without even knowing that she was going to be able to play in college. She was the first female student athlete to get a full scholarship to college in the history of the United States. It is a remarkable story. And had she not done all of those things as a young person, it would not have prepared her for all that she was going to do later on in life. Obviously, great family foundation and support, but her pursuit of all of the things that she wanted to do has just led her to this remarkable life. And the other thing that I got from my conversation with her was not necessarily something that she said, but there's just something about her that is 100% class. She is a class act in everything that she does. And I know that some of that came from her parenting, from her parents. Some of it came from her interactions with mentors like Coach Wooden, but part of it's just who she is. And the lesson is that everybody that comes in contact with her, I'm sure, has an amazing experience when they leave her. And then additionally, we've interviewed Miss Val, the legendary gymnastics coach at UCLA, and talking to Miss Val about Ann, the impact that she's had on her life, and sending her that card every month for 11 years, checking in on her friend to see how she's doing as she was battling through cancer, and now beyond, she hasn't stopped since. And I think it's just an amazing lesson that you can have an impact in a small way on people over the course of time that add up to this big, giant impact that you've had. You just have to make it a priority, and you got to take the time to do it. Again, appreciate Ann coming on the show. It was an absolute pleasure to interview her. Again, as always, if you like what we're doing here, please share this with a friend. The best way to spread the word about our podcast is just tell a friend that you like listening to what we do. We've got a whole bunch of cool shows coming up for you in the near future, and hopefully you stay tuned and share the word. Until next time, have a great day.